Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Marketers Shooting the Shit. It is the morning coffee and cigar edition of this. For me, it's also fancy ass monogram letter mug day. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see all of what I just held up. Very happy today to be joined by Brian Griffiths from Be Strong Marketing. Superb guy. I've heard that he is a super kind gentleman. This is our second time talking, and I can attest to the fact that he's an all-around nice guy, great web designer, great marketer, really got a great head on his shoulders. So it's really my privilege to have you on today, Brian, because I get to sound smart by being associated with smart people. So thank you very much for being here. How you doing today?
Thanks, and I appreciate the warm introduction, Shawn. Hope I don't leave anyone's head spinning. I talk a little fast sometimes, but it's funny. It's like I'm seeing your background out your window there, and I'm kind of reminded how cold and wet of a day it is.
Yeah, it's we're recording this December, and in Pennsylvania, and it is definitely not super pleasant weather. I am outside actually, so
Really?
Yeah. So I dragged all my stuff outside to record this, so I could have a cigar while doing this. Like, that was kind of like the joke of this when I was talking to my wife about doing this podcast. I was like, really, I'm just looking to like talk shit and smoke cigars on a podcast, and like that's just really what I kind of do. And then, like, of course, I start it in the middle of December where the weather is just awful, so it's like, all right, mostly just drinking whiskey and talking shit. So
It's basically talking with your friends and talking shop.
that's exactly it. So I'd love to start at the beginning. You know, when if I were to ask your parents or the folks that were around when you were a kid, to describe Brian as a young hellion, what how would they describe you?
God, probably overly sarcastic with a smart mouth. It got him in trouble a lot.
I'm noticing a trend among marketers that seems to be
a little too energetic after drinking a can of Pepsi. I remember I used to do somersaults off the couch after I do that. I know, like, nutritionists say that, like, hyperactivity after sugar is not a thing, and I'm like, I remember myself as a kid, so you tell me what that was.
Yeah, right.
But probably also artistic. I was constantly drawing. Crayons when I was a little kid, eventually graduating up to art pencils and colored pencils when I was in my early teens. Probably after my early teens, glued to a book constantly.
Nice.
Like my start in all of this, I actually really kind of started from being an artist. Because eventually that led into a career in graphic design, which led into a career in web design, which then going, well, what is this deal with web design and graphic design? Well, this is a part of marketing. Maybe you should know something about marketing. And then here I am.
Oof.
Yeah.
Nice. So did you go to school for graphic design?
Yeah, I went sort of. My degree is funny because it's the way that I went to Lycoming College in Williamsport, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And the way what my education was structured back in the 90s is that you, as an art student, you were an art student first. So technically my degree is in studio art with a specialization in commercial design.
Okay. It's funny enough, very similar to my degree is technically graphic design and commercial art. So it's like they like kind of word souped it just in a different order.
Yeah, I think back, like I said, I think back in the mid to late 90s is when I went to college. I think they just didn't quite have a sense of where design was going at that point, because like they were literally just coming in. I mean, Photoshop was on Photoshop 4. Like that's when I was in college, and they were, like there were still some shops around that still shot with paper negatives and made film and then used what was called stripping, which has nothing to do with
oh man.
Yeah. My one of my first jobs out of college, I worked in a print house in
Ah,
Bristol, Pennsylvania that was making credit card mailers. Couldn't get a job in my field right away, so I got a kind of an associated job for about half a year, doing like basically running film plates and checking Quark Express files and
yeah,
stuff like that in a place that printed credit card mailers. You know, remember like when the heyday of that back in like the 90s or in the 2000s.
yep,
Yeah, I was part of that.
got
So
it.
unfortunately.
No,
So
I think that that is something that's kind of lost on the new generation of designers. And that's when I went to high school. I went to a technical high school, so the class that I like, what was my shop was
hmm,
commercial printing.
oh well.
So like that was the fundamentals. Like our first year in there, we didn't use computers beyond like typesetting. You know what I mean? Like it was, we were doing exactly what you're describing, where you print things out, you're burning plates, you know, you're doing all that stuff. And it's like it really helped me have a foundation for what we physically see on the screen and on paper. You know, the fact that it's like, oh, you're talking about four colors, you're talking about, you know, like that whole world. And it's like I think it's something that's kind of, the appreciation for that craft is kind of lost now, because it's like, okay, yeah, I just fire up Adobe Creative Suite now. Like I don't even think I don't even think they keep a number on it anymore, do they?
I don't think so. I mean,
Yeah.
the only thing that I see the difference is that when I go and I open up programs on my computer, it'll say Photoshop 2023. And I'm
Yeah.
like, when did that happen? You know?
Right, right, right.
But what I also but I think also like us having a little bit more of a design background, I think it's different than most people that are in this field, because most people, I mean, if you want to look at the idea of marketers, most marketers that I've met don't have a design background.
Right.
And so, you know, I think a lot of them are just like, you know, knocking stuff together on Canva. Like,
True.
I don't
Yeah.
even think they get the Adobe Creative Suite. They just go Canva and that's it. And I'm like,
Yep.
Canva, what's that?
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. There's a craft to it. And I think there's a an appreciation that you gather too, and just when you have to take that many steps to a to achieve what you're trying to achieve, like you develop a different thought process. Like when I was, my first job right out of college was at a an ad agency that did the newspaper ads for local car dealerships. So it's like those big ugly ads, but it was like, but man,
Garish
like,
as hell.
yeah, but they work though. And that's the thing, is that like, you know, like you learn, you get into it because you think like, oh, I get to be creative and I get to make really cool looking things. And, you know, and you do, you know, you definitely do. But it's like, hold on, if I can't communicate and persuade with what I'm creating, I won't have a job.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's what's back of all marketing and all design is just that exact concept. Whether you actually communicate and whether you're able to actually persuade, it's like don't. I think the central one of the central lessons of marketing is that concept,
Yeah.
and that if it doesn't do those things, in the end, it's worthless.
Hmm.
You know, like
Absolutely.
the thing that I tend to be old school because I tend to focus old school to this degree. I like to focus on fundamentals. You know, like at some point in the next year, I plan on even reading the old 1933 book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I've never read it. Have it? You know,
Oh
but it's
man.
have it, haven't read it. I actually bought it like 3 or 4 years ago and haven't read it. I just have a tendency to buy a lot of books. I mean, you know, you see all around
Yeah,
me
yeah,
stuff
they're all
over
around
here.
you.
I've actually slowed down on my on books I buy, because it's kind of like it's almost like kind of like wish listing stuff on Amazon, but you buy it. Meaning like you're not needing a book right now, but you don't want to, but you want to kind of like reserve it for the future. So you buy it, but then it sits on a shelf and you start to kind of go, why is my bank account going down after I
Yeah.
just bought 5 of them this month?
Yeah, or even worse, what I do, like if I buy Audible version, like I feel like I didn't really do it any justice without owning the actual book. So I'll get it on Audible and then buy the physical book. I might never crack it open. So it's like
I've done it where
double time.
I've got it on Audible. I used to have an Audible subscription, but I realized I wasn't really using it or using it to the degree that I should. So I finally canceled it. But I was on one of those like $20 a month Audible subscriptions, and I had a period of where I'd buy the physical copy, I get the digital copy because hey, I might be out somewhere, I might not have my book with me, and I might want to read it.
Of
I actually had
course.
that happen yesterday, by the way. I had a meeting end earlier than I was expecting, but I had a follow up appointment that was that was supposed to be half an hour after that meeting ended. Well, I'm going like, okay, well, I have 30 or 40 minutes to kill. And hey, look, the book that I have is on my phone. So
Crack it open.
yeah, so I'd buy like all 3 freaking editions of it like a nut job.
That's
Um,
funny.
and yeah, one time I actually used to almost try to keep it from my girlfriend, like I was buying crack or something like that. She's like, "Oh, look, you bought another book." She's like, "Yeah, so what? Big deal. As long as you can pay the rent."
Yeah, that's as I feel like that's like what entrepreneurs hide from their significant others. It's like, oh no, another box of books just came in.
Yeah, totally. But like I said, I like to focus on fundamentals a lot of times. Like I don't read
Sure.
a lot of blog posts and stuff like that. And what I find interesting is that a lot of people, this is maybe like one of my real true criticisms of the field. And I mean, marketing's a broad field. It's, I mean, everyone from like little guys like us to companies that do, commercials for mega ultranational
Sure.
companies,
Yep.
you know, um, at all different levels. So I mean, but the main thing that I probably have a bitch about is just the fact that everyone, it, there's a tendency to be out basics meaning like lacking basics, and so people just end up chasing shiny objects to chase the next big thing. Actually, what I find funny is off the time the next big thing was something that was written in a book 20-25 years ago that
100%.
some schmuck decided to finally read, start talking about, and everyone's on that bandwagon without realizing where it came from. Like the big thing right now that I hear a lot of people talk about is community. You must create a community around your business. It's like, can you imagine the local plumber having a community around their business? It's like, it's kind of stupid,
Right. Yeah,
Um,
the theory versus the application of it. It's like, and then and I feel bad for the small businesses that get wrapped up in those conversations too, because it's like, man, I just want to be able to pay my employees at the end of the day. And it's like, if we marketers focus on anything beyond that satisfies our own ego, like we're doing them a disservice. It's, if we were doctors, it would be malpractice.
yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you something that I have found for the local marketer is that there's one hurdle that you really need to jump over. Now, obviously there's budget, there's just the willingness to talk to you to begin with, knowing enough about what you do to, get invited to that conversation. But I had to say, like, probably the biggest thing that I've realized is that if you do not convince them that they can get leads from their website, you're just talking out your butt, like you're wasting your time. Like I have a client right now that I'm still trying to convince a year later, finished his website. We have marketing meetings. He pays me for marketing blocks of marketing consulting hours. And we just had a conversation the other day where I said, guy's an engineer. I said, and we're not talking like he's old school, like he's, a boomer who's, wishes the internet would go away or something like that 2 years from retiring. We're talking like he's a young guy who's in his early 40s and younger than me. And but when I bring up this fact, he says, look, nobody searches for civil engineers. Civil engineers get hired by construction managers and accountants. I mean, I'm not accountants, and architects. So it's all relational. And so I might be pivoting more to a brand building thought leadership role as opposed to let's drive traffic to your website, let's run, direct response sort of ads from Facebook or something like that, where, it's usually more funnel building. But I mean, I think that's just a skill of being able to pivot. And that might actually make a lot of sense from his business standpoint. But the reason why, even though we've been working together for a year and a half on certain things, which usually has to do more with messaging and his customer journey and all that stuff. But the main reason I haven't been able to sell design to him, or not sell digital marketing to him, stuff like what you do, is primarily because I can't convince him yet that digital marketing is actually going to do anything for his business.
Sure.
And I think if you don't if the small business marketer, SMB marketer doesn't, if he doesn't convince the business owner that they can actually get leads, because there's a good chance they're going to say every lead, like, I only get leads from word of mouth and referrals and relationships.
Absolutely.
Marketing, yeah.
And I apologize if you're hearing some background windy noise.
Actually, believe it or not, the noise canceling on your microphone must be doing good, because I'm actually not hearing anything but your voice.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. Good. Shout out to the folks at Mayono. They built a quality microphone, and the denoise function works pretty well. Apparently, I hear it in my headphones, so I'm just making. I just wanted to bring it up. But anyway,
I'm surprised I don't have my a cat or my dog at my door scratching. Because that's usually what happens. And I'm like, God damn it, shut up.
So, yeah, man, I see that all the time, and I think it really boils down to just kind of, what business owners think about and what their vision for themselves is. Like, unfortunately, people just convince themselves of something until something drastic happens to them. And they need that, like, snap into reality. That's like actually, you're mentioning your civil engineer client. I had a similar situation. Like, I was at I don't really do these things much anymore, but like, I was at a business card exchange kind of thing, and there was an attorney there, and he comes up to me like, he gets my business card. He's like, "Oh, digital marketing, I don't do any of that. Like, all my business is word of mouth." And I kind of just shot back to him. I was like, "Well," I mentioned his competitor. I was like, "Oh, your competitor is a client of mine. They're cleaning up." And he just it was just kind of like, "Oh, okay. So maybe I'm thinking of this wrong." And it's like, I don't recommend doing that, but like, I'm kind of, you were talking about being a sarcastic little kid. I guess I never grew out of that. But
by the way, did you breathe on your camera? Because I can't tell if that's smoke hanging in the air or. There you go.
Yeah, I think it's probably just like
condensation.
Yeah. It's just like kind of humid, weird, weird winter humidity. So thank you for that.
Yeah, not a problem, because it's like one thing, like when you blow smoke out, I'm like, wait, that's not clearing. and I get what you're saying. It's like I saw one time, I think it was like Ryan Dice from Digital Marketer. I've done a lot of training through them.
Sure.
Fantastic information and great resource. And they're talking about like kind of a way of looking at like your total available market, and like in a series of concentric circles, where it's like the easiest hot leads and warm leads and then cold leads to get. And that the reason why most businesses hit a ceiling is because you've used up everything you can in that central circle of potential hot leads, because that's as far as like your network goes.
Absolutely.
Now, occasionally you do meet somebody who says, "Oh, I'm happy with the fact that I work by myself. I don't want employees. I like the caseloads that I have, or workload that I have." And
absolutely,
they park it right there. But a lot of businesses are going, "Yeah, I would like to grow." Or the bigger problem, especially in today's economy, is I can't grow. And part of the reason that they're not growing is because they are not reaching beyond that first circle. If you look at kind of like a traffic temperature of warm or hot, warm, cold, it's like they're not being able, that those cold, getting out to those cold leads, meaning people have never heard of them, possibly don't even know that they need your solution, and educating them that they might have a problem that you can solve, and then gaining the know, like, and trust, and then demand factor. You know, like you're not going to grow unless you start getting out of that comfort zone. I mean, everyone talks about the comfort zone. Everyone thinks about the box that you have to think outside of. But then when you say, hey, by the way, you know, like your marketing, like it's marketing that will get you there. Networking will get you this little tiny center.
Yeah.
But you're not going to really get out to the much wider zone of your total addressable market.
Absolutely.
If you don't actually market.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, the way that I look at marketing is, like, at the end of the day, you're talking about the know, like, and trust factor. I mean, it boils down to the relationships that people have with you at the end of the day. And it might not be, you know, like what we think of as a relationship where it's like, oh, this guy's my friend, this woman is my spouse, you know, whatever, however you want to break down an interpersonal relationship. But there's also the relationships that we have, you know, like I have, for better, for worse, a relationship with Amazon where, you know what I mean? Like if I need something, I trust that when I go on there, I'm going to go on, order it. It's going to be here within a reasonable amount of time. Now, I will say my relationship with Amazon right now is a little rocky. They sent my wife's Christmas present over with it labeled on the side of the box what it is. So when she got the Amazon box, she saw what her Christmas gift was. But
totally thoughtless.
But that's a sidebar. But it's a yeah, I mean, the relationships factor, you know, that stems from the know, like, and trust part of the equation. You know, you can do so much of that by networking. You know what I mean? Like, essentially you can shake one hand at a time, but marketing gives you that leverage to start the know, like, and trust factor at scale.
100%. That was actually the funny thing is that when I brought up How to Win Friends and Influence People, the sole reason I bought that book, because I'm not usually into that kind of like self-help type stuff. And, you know, Dale Carnegie is kind of old school, you know, it's almost 100 years old. You know, the examples that he's giving are from like the 1915s, you know, 1915 and stuff like that. I mean, I believe in the timelessness of data, but it's just not something that's on the top of my list normally. The reason I picked it up is because Dan Kennedy in one of his books, you know, the grandfather of direct marketing.
100%.
He said in one of his books, which I don't remember which one, looking over at my shelf over here, that marketing is essentially taking what's in How to Win Friends and Influence People and how to do it and doing it at scale.
Yep. Yeah.
You know,
100%.
And what's funny sometimes is that with that know, like, and trust factor, I'll see people try to say that's not really a thing. People do business with people that they like, you know, and you'll see people push back on that, and they'll say, well, when I go on Amazon and I buy something, I just blah 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 blah, or that doesn't really count because of like stuff like Walmart. And it's like, the fuck it doesn't, you know. Sorry,
right.
If you have to go back and wait that out, you know. Okay.
No, the name of the show is Marketers Shooting the Shit. So
I had the feeling I was okay with that, but
no, you're good.
It's just how I casually talk. But oh yeah, that's also something that my parents would have told you from when I was a kid, that I was probably cursing from the time I was in third grade onwards. So that's nice. That's their own fault for allowing it, though. And it's like being in third grade and yelling at one of my friends, "What the hell are you doing?" And then suddenly having them turn around, looking at me shocked, and then I didn't shout that out on a schoolyard. Yep. I'm just going, uh-oh, you gotta watch yourself. Yep. But I just think that the stuff like the Amazon and it said it absolutely does, because as you said, you're trusting them to show up with a quality product. You know, if you didn't know who they were, if you didn't, you know, you must look, I'm just as much a critic. I can critique Bezos just as much as the next guy.
Sure. Yeah.
For his business practices. But I'll tell you what, I like him enough. I like the company enough that I will buy from them.
Right.
You know, like all my girlfriend's Christmas presents that, and by the way, they did not do this to me. I got 3 of them the other day, and not all of them were in Amazon boxes,
Yeah.
without the label on them. Um, you know, I know, like, and trust them well enough to
Yeah.
buy from them. I mean, crap, I saw something that I wanted the other day, and I'm going, huh, what if this is on Amazon? It's not. You know, it's
Yeah.
specialty pack of cards that I wanted to buy that an
Sure.
artist that I follow on Facebook, creative, real fantastic fantasy artist. And and I only found it available in like 3 places, and like 2 of them were like little local bookstore websites in like New England. And I'm like, do I want to buy this? Because it's like, I support small business, but are they going to mess my order up? Is it going to take like 8 months for it to get here? You know,
Right.
like, I support small businesses. I love buying from, you know, I have half a dozen small shops in my area that I love to frequent and help out. But at the same time, if I'm expecting to get something and through e-commerce and get it in a reasonable amount of time and not have it be like next June,
Yeah.
I'm a little hesitant to buy it.
Yeah. And that's actually an interesting point, because we talked about, mindset of businesses a little bit ago. I think that's a big problem among small businesses, is they think they can't be something, at the Amazon. Like you know, they don't like Amazon, they don't like Walmart, they don't like, and it's just kind of like, okay, we have to take a couple things into consideration here. One, people just expect things fast, for better or for worse. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
They
look
they
how,
they cranked a ratchet so far that ratchets,
yeah,
when you work a ratchet, it doesn't go backwards.
yeah,
That ratchet is going so far forward. If you do not figure that out, you're dead in the water. And just,
absolutely.
I don't know how. I'm not an e-commerce expert, but I'm just going to say, from a consumer standpoint, you're dead if you don't fix it. That part of
Yeah,
your business.
yeah, and that's, if you're in business, you have to adapt. Like, look at Netflix. I mean, love or hate them, you know what I mean? Like, they were shipping DVDs by mail, and then they saw that it's like, hey, people want their stuff now.
Yeah.
So they went totally digital. And it's like, you know what? Like, that's just responding to a market that's changing. That's really all it boils down to.
Absolutely. But also, getting back to small business, I think that a lot of them, I think what a lot of them miss out on is positioning. Positioning sounds like, it's one of those old terms from like, 1972
Hmm.
that people throw around. They don't really understand. I was talking to that client that I mentioned about it, and I realized I need to understand it better because I've read some articles on it, but I never really read a book on it and
Okay.
practiced it. But what I mean by that is, like, what is positioning? Positioning is like, it's like that file drawer you occupy in someone's head in
Yeah.
relationship to other things.
Yep.
So like, who owns the word cars to you? And I tell my client, I
Mm.
said, to me, that's probably Ford. I grew up
Yeah.
in a Ford family. My grandmother worked for Ford, so for years until her passing about 7 years ago, we used to get discounts on cars because of her. And plus, also, I grew up on that whole, American cars are better than, Japanese
Sure.
imports
Yeah.
and all that stuff. So to this day, I mean, I tend not to consider any other vehicle unless it's a Ford.
Yeah.
So their position to me is that they own that keyword of personal vehicles.
Yeah.
But who's going to, if you started a car company, how would you ever compete with them? Well, you do something like what Tesla did, regardless of Elon Musk and him being a jerk.
Sure.
He, like, Tesla owns the keyword of, like, cool luxury electric vehicles.
Electric cars. Yep. Yep.
So if you take that as their position, like, then suddenly they blow up and have as much financial net worth as like Ford does, and
Yeah.
just a handful of years. So that's the power of stuff like that. And I think what most small business owners miss, without getting into the technicalities of how do you figure out your position and XY axes and stuff like that,
Right.
tend to use and all that crap, is that you have to figure out what you want to be known for. And you can't just say that, like, even if you're just something as simple and everyday as an electrician, well, what about
Yeah,
it? You know, stop turning around telling people that you do quality service. Everybody does. You wouldn't be in
everybody.
business. You know, like people who do shit service will not be in business for very long. So
Right.
you know, so you can't walk around saying that we do it better. You
Yeah.
know, it's
And
establish who you are and figure out what is that thing. It's like, you know, are you an electrician who are you the most modern electrician, you
yeah,
know, yeah,
I have,
stuff like that.
I know somebody, he's an old school electrician. Built a great company, you know, wiring buildings up as office buildings are being built. Like he's made a great living doing that, but he's found himself a neat little niche in being the expert guy in installing Tesla charging stations. You know,
Nice.
so you know what I mean? So like if somebody in the area is like, all right, we're installing this, that's what everyone's like, oh, you got to call this guy.
Yeah, perfect. And the funny thing is that's like defining your position by defining like your niche, as you said. It's not the only way to do it, but
Sure.
it's a great way, it's a great example of how that actually
Yeah.
works, and and the financial benefits then.
Yeah.
You know, if he was just an electrician and, you
Yeah.
know, he's the guy who's running around, who's also, you know, you know, doing everything under the sun for everyone, you know, he's losing out to the other 50 people in his town
Absolutely. Yeah.
that are doing the exact same thing and have maybe slightly better SEO than him.
Right. And at the end of the day, like if you have a homeowner that's like, okay, I need, you know, an outlet or two fixed or whatever, and they're calling up 2 to 3 electricians and getting quotes, like at that point, your only differentiator, if you're competing on
Nice.
that level, is price. And that's a lousy way to live.
That's very lousy because it kills your margins. Seth Godin
Mhm.
refers to it as the race to the bottom.
Yep.
And
100%.
that,
Yep.
you know, race to the bottom, you never know, yeah, when you win, you actually lose, you know,
Absolutely.
and also too, even in that factor, again, you're still coming back to that those circles of, you know, hot leads, warm leads, and cold leads. You know, it's like you don't really need that much in the way of differentiation and positioning when you know, when you're Bill's brother and Bill, you know, you're the electrician and Bill goes and tells his buddy that, hey, you should use my brother when you know, and doing the rewiring for your kitchen or something like that.
Right.
Um, you know, and that sort of word of mouth market, you know, it's you, that's where it becomes relational. It's like,
Mhm.
hey, he's a great guy, you should call him. Oh, look, they have a website. Okay, good. They're a legitimate company. Oh, look, they have 3 5-star reviews stretched out over 10 years. They must not be that bad. You
Yeah.
know, like that's where you usually and oh, look, you know, he came in at a similar price to this other guy that my coworker told me about. That's where you know, you don't need that sort of stuff at that level. If you actually plan on having a company that supports you and supports your family, that you might be able to sell one day or pass on to your kids, or at least it's going to compete in a market that may get quite a bit worse, you know, like,
Mhm.
because I don't know, everyone's been talking about a recession for a while, and they talk about recession so much that the media is creating one,
Mhm.
like they usually do. And you know, if you don't have some, if you're just relying upon 1992 methods. And I know I put that in the 90s, but you know, literally we're talking back to probably the 1950s, the
Sure. Yeah.
1920s. If you're relying upon, well, this is how we do business, this is how we always do business, you know, networking business cards, word of mouth referrals. God, you know, that's really putting your future in somebody else's hands.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. So I want to circle back to the idea of the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. What other fundamental era books and or whatever programs or whatever have you found to be pretty useful and
Uh,
helpful?
couple like I'm actually circling back to Donald Miller's story brand books.
Oh,
Right
sure.
now, I'm not story brand. I'm not a story brand guy. You know, like that's like a
Hmm.
$5,000 or $7,000 a year certification with special training and stuff like
Sure.
that. but I find the messaging data in those books to be fantastic. I told you before we got on that I just gave a talk a few days ago, and it was primarily to a small group of business owners off a platform called Alignable, which is a small business networking platform, and maybe only 8 or 10 people, something like that. And what I talked about was on website homepage structuring. I call it like the secrets to a high converting homepage. But what it really happened to be about was how to structure your like headline and subheadline. And a lot of my information, some of it was borrowed from Digital Marketer, and some of it was borrowed, but a bit of it comes from just some of the concepts that are in Marketing Made Simple, which is one of Donald Miller's books from a few years ago.
Yeah.
I found it funny. Like I relaunched my company, took a job for 2 years and then relaunched my company right in the middle of the pandemic in November of 2020.
Why not?
I was a graphic designer beforehand, took a job for 2 years, and then came back as Be Strong Marketing. And I had all this marketing experience and information, and I'm trying to get my homepage, my website written. And what's weird is that no one ever really tells you how to put a website together. Like they'll tell you the technicalities of it, but what's supposed to go on it? And here I am going, okay, I'm trying to figure this out, and I'm going, I have no fucking foggiest clue as to what the hell to put on my homepage.
Yep.
I get tired of the stupid, like I have this many years experience and blah, 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 blah. What am I supposed to put here?
Yeah.
And just the whole idea of just going, okay, well, what you're really doing is you're creating a story that you're inviting other people to participate in, meaning your customers, where they're the hero and you're like the Yoda-like guide. I think that, and I'm a Star Wars fan, so of course that resonates with me a little bit. It starts to make sense for how to structure the messaging of something like a homepage and about page. And I think without that, I think you're at a disadvantage. One of the things I learned through Digital Marketer, again, some really fantastic courses that really teach you the basics, is that marketing is basically a system where you produce profitable and consistent leads.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an amplification. But what that is actually an amplification system of whatever your core marketing message is. And so if you don't have a core marketing message, what the hell are you promoting? What are you amplifying?
Right.
You're just walking up to you have a microphone in front of you. It'd be like walking up to a microphone and just saying random shit into it. And, and occasionally some of that random shit might be, buy my products.
Yeah. That's why I started this podcast, damn it, because I just wanted to turn on a microphone and say random shit.
Well, of course, but it also builds authority for you. So I mean that helps also. Plus, also we're talking about too, like community. Not every business has to be part of the community, but or has to have a community. But I think it's important to be part of the community.
Sure, definitely.
And I think that's what you're doing. I mean, look, I'm just a small town marketer, just like you and probably all your other guests so far in these first few episodes, but you're giving us a voice.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the fun thing about marketing is that there's so many ways of doing it. And I'm not talking about the technical side of it, because that, geez, like you break down all the different new shiny object things that we talked about earlier, where it's like, okay, yeah, I'm a chatbot marketer. It's like, okay, hold up, bro. Like you're not a chatbot marketer. You are a marketer that is satisfying people's needs to communicate. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like before there was chatbots, there were call centers. You know what I mean? Like you are just doing what you're doing, and it's just a different way of satisfying what people want.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of almost missed that period in the 90s in 1998 when I first graduated school, where, I my first design job, I worked for a print and copy shop, and we would have like some local marketers sometimes come in amongst all the other customer types that we had. And I remember there were just marketers, like now marketing's different,
Sure.
it's fundamentally changed because of digital, and it involves the entirety of the customer journey, not just the steps of awareness and engagement. That's
Yeah.
what it used to be. So I mean, I'm not going to turn around and sit there and yearn for the earlier days, but what I do yearn for is that people would shut the F up about, like, I'm a this or that type of marketer, or the ridiculous
Right. Yeah.
titles people come up with. By the way, I think if you ever want to sound smart and different, take whatever it is that you do and put the word experience on the end of it. No kidding, because I used
Yep.
to be in a paid marketing community. They were a good group, they were nice people, but they were all kind of corporate marketers, or kind of turned corporate marketing. So eventually, after about a year and a half, I finally dropped out of it the other month. And I have friends from it still saying, you dropped out? And I'm like, yeah, I wasn't getting value from it. But
Right.
you would also see, again, nice people. Nobody was really being intentionally pretentious, but you would see like their titles. So like, in just a few,
Oh yeah.
I remember like there used to be graphic designers and web designers, and eventually it turned into user interface
Yeah.
designers.
Yep.
Which I can understand the change in title, because you're not just designing a printed page or something for someone to read online. You're also looking at how people interact. So, but you made the jump to that, to now it's user experience. I would watch people go. I learned about a subject that you don't really hear at the local level so much, but it's the buzzword, or it's one of the top like 3 buzzwords right now in corporate marketing, which is account-based marketing.
Oh yeah.
ABM. I literally saw somebody that had as their title accounts based experience, ABX. And I'm like, what the it's like, not stop putting fucking experience on things and act like you're like the badass and on the cutting edge. It's
Yeah.
like, just say what you are. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like go to market. Go to market's one of those other ones right now. That's the big
Oh
buzzword.
yeah.
And I read the definition of it, and I'm like going, so it sounds like marketing.
Yeah.
Like, no, it involves all this, and you involve like customer
So,
experience people,
right.
and sales and finance. And it says, oh, what you mean is
So
that you just actually have your organization on the same page,
yeah.
which is something you should do anyway, and that you're doing marketing.
Right. You're doing marketing. I feel like there's a drinking game in there somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, or maybe it's just it could be a fun bet. Like you see somebody change their LinkedIn title to XYZ experience, and it's like, okay, how long over under until they change to some other buzzword?
Go to market experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go,
Yeah.
go to experience.
Yep. So I don't know. Like, it is funny to see that kind of thing happen. And maybe this episode we should call like marketers talking shit. But
I took a lot of shit because I just, it's my problem in life. I have a simultaneously my biggest gift and my biggest curse. It's the thing that drives me the most nuts in dealing with other people is that my talent is that I see both broad and deep. And what I mean is I could see a lot of factors, but I could also follow those factors out deeply into whatever it is. I'm not Albert Einstein genius level. I'm lost in upper level mathematics, how I get lost in some of the grade school mathematics. I'm not the guy to figure out the next big thing. In entrepreneurship, somehow it frustrates the hell out of me that I can't figure out like how to create a startup that blows up to $1 million or several $1 billion. It frustrates me as a thinking person. But that's my talent. I can see wide, I can see deep.
yeah.
And the problem is that most people, they see narrow and they see shallowly. And so you sit there and you go, oh, like, why don't you see this?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you see this?
Yeah. Where do you think that intuition came from?
Just who I am. I don't know. Just I mean, it's kind of like saying I'm a creative person also. Where do you think that came from?
Right.
Inside of who I am. But I mean, I became the funny thing about me is like I hated reading up until I was about 13. I don't know how I got A's and B's throughout all my elementary and half of middle school, because I literally would never do the reading,
Yeah.
like, especially if it was like in an English class, we had to read like an entire novel. I was just really good at listening to classroom discussion. I'm
Yep.
really good at it. So I knew what questions that they were going to ask about the story beforehand. So I would just like kind of by of osmosis kind of get it
Yeah.
inside me. But then eventually my brother started reading fantasy novels and I started wanting to emulate them because I thought the cover art was super cool.
Got it.
And it just made me like trapped to very thin pieces of trees with black ink on them for the next 30 something years.
Yeah. There you go.
But I mean, I think that's always helped. I think I'm not even as well read as I would love to be. But I think one of the things is, and actually this is a really good point as we're getting close to our hour here, is I think I think if you want to say talking shit, there's a little bit of talking shit, but it's also, I think, a good lesson, which is know something outside of marketing or business.
Yeah.
Learn something outside of it, read something else, because eventually you're just saying, I commented on somebody's LinkedIn post this morning and I said, there's probably only really 24 really smart people in marketing right now that produces most of the content. And everybody else is just kind of reiterating what they're saying
Right.
that they originally said better. And look, I'm not going to say that I'm much different. I talk a lot out of Seth Godin and Ryan Dice and a few others. So
Yeah.
I'm not really saying anything different. But where you bring it in different is when you also said, you know what? Well, I read like 5 books on the history of the ancient Norse or something like that, and then you pick up all these like psychological or societal or cultural things, and you go, I can see how that applies to marketing. Or
Yeah.
I don't care if it's bass fishing, you're likely to find something that's going
Yeah.
to add a fresh viewpoint to your field.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we've you know touched on this a couple times where it's like, okay, like people in like the 20s and 30s figured a lot of this direct response stuff out. Like you see, like you know, communities, and I'm not saying anything bad about these people, but like communities like ClickFunnels, where
Yeah.
they're building a whole community around this idea of launch an ad, sell a product, blah blah blah. It's like that's just old school direct response marketing, and I think they finally started admitting to some of that. Like their positioning a few years back, I feel was, hey, we created this, but you really boil it down, and it's stuff from the 30, like scientific advertising. When the hell was that published? Like that
It
was like,
was like in the 20s. I
yeah.
it's one of those ones that I haven't gotten to yet, even though it's
Oh
like
yeah.
50 pages long.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like it all boils back to, that stuff. And, like to a certain degree, it's like, okay, yeah, there's really nothing original under the sun at this point. It's just how you package it. But, you know, if you can put your own unique spin to it and make associations that people haven't made before, I think that's a tremendous amount of value that you bring to the business community and everything else at large.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this also. It's like I cut my teeth on on Russell Brunson's books originally.
Hmm.
Some of my first books in marketing were his was like
Sure.
.com secrets and expert
Yeah,
secrets. There's still some very good stuff in those books.
absolutely.
I'm not part of that community anymore because at a certain point that I just realized that I didn't need to be spending hundreds of dollars a month on a piece of software that I can get better pieces of software for the third of the price. So I decided I would. Plus, the group tends to be a little bit cultish, like
Yeah.
I was part of the official Facebook
Oh yeah,
ClickFunnels
yeah, yeah.
group. A
Yep.
lot of nice people in the group that will really help you out. You'll be like, hey, look, my ad isn't producing, like what's going on here. And they'll say, oh, we'll put it up and they'll add a critique. But then if you had somebody come in and say, why should I use ClickFunnels? Somebody will turn around and will start actually berating
Oh
the
yeah.
person who asked the question as if it was like you're questioning their beliefs in God or something like that
Right.
in a very direct way. And I'm kind of going, I've seen that a little too many times, and I decided with everything combined that I didn't like it. But the other
Yeah.
thing is, I think what they finally have to start, what Russell started to push, I think, in more of his content was, yeah, you know what, the thing that Dan Kennedy used to say, that, you know, no brand building, you know, screw brand
Yep.
building. It's all about the sale, direct sales. That's it. Or at least low cost or no cost brand building. But beyond that, you know, just shut the F up about it. I think he finally started to realize that content marketing is actually a major part of getting your funnels to actually work, because if there is no one to you know, like, if the no like and trust factor is massive nowadays, so just running an ad to a funnel, it's probably not going to do it. But if you turn around and start to build an audience, start to create a list, you know, you really kind of build up the affinity that we've spoken about earlier, you know, then when you turn around and you say, hey, by the way, buy my product, they've already listened to 20 of your podcasts, they've read a couple of your blogs, they're following you on 3 social media accounts, and they say, well, sure, I'll buy that thing for $500.
Right.
As opposed to, I'm just going to run a Facebook ad.
Yeah. Yep.
I think they're finally starting to realize that. So it's like the fundamentals of human communication end up rolling in the end than just like a shotgun attempt to get a result right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it boils down to you're selling to people, you're communicating with people.
Yeah.
And, you know, yes, there was definitely probably a heyday of all it took was an ad and you could sell something. Like that was, but human evolution, people started putting guards up. You know what I mean? So like people have to build that know, like, and trust factor now, which, you know, kind of all circles back to you got to evolve with it. And I have nothing negative to say about ClickFunnels or their community and all that. Like, I think they've done beautiful. They've helped a lot of people, you know, make a living. And it just, you know, boils down to what we were talking about earlier. They built a great community. But you know, it does at the end of the day boil down to you're dealing with people, and you have to communicate to people the way that they want to be communicated to.
And you have to do it in a persuasive way and communicate value to them. Yeah, it's 100%. It's funny thing is we've spoken for an hour now, and basically in the end, everything we've said comes down to that.
Absolutely. So I really appreciate you being on and sharing your knowledge. And, you know, it's like I said, we've talked before, but, you know, it's really cool just to kind of, you know, hop on and talk shop with you and, you know, get to know a little bit more about who you are. So again, thank you immensely for being on. Yeah, where can people find you across the web, your website, your socials, etc.?
Well, the website's bstrongmarketing.com. B is just letter B, the word strong, marketing.com. Don't put the E in there. That's where you can find, that's my website. Check me out. I'm primarily on do my business stuff on LinkedIn. Just look under my name, look for the picture of the guy with the beard and who isn't smiling. And I mean, I do have Facebook and Instagram accounts, but I don't use them as much right now, but primarily there. If you're a small business owner and you happen to be on alignable.com, you know, just put my name in, check me out.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you again. We'll have all those links in the show notes or description, depending on where you're watching. That's a new word. Watching or listening to this ad. And once again, thank you immensely for coming on and sharing with us.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity and you know, give me a chance to actually have a voice. So really appreciate it.
You got it, man. Have a great day.
Okay, yep, thank you. Take care.